everything you ever dreamed came true. When you laugh, when you cry, I'll be always on your side, and thank God for you and me. When you were 12, your brother said, I will always have your back. When you're happy, when you're sad, through it all.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we'll be talking about the scene in Nain. Jesus raising a widow's son. It's in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. I'll start by reading the passage. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a city called Nain, and his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. Now, as he approached the gate of the city, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a sizable crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, "Do not go on weeping." And he came up and touched the coffin, and the bearers came to a halt. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. Fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, "A great prophet has appeared among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding region. As you well know, the Gospels have many narratives, many accounts of deeds of Jesus. The Gospels they have the deeds, the narratives of Jesus. They also have the teachings of Jesus, discourses. This one in Nain is one that many people may overlook or not even know about. But it's packed with all kinds of theological ramifications and symbolism. Before I get more into it, I'd like for us to let's take a quick look at the map I provided. Hopefully it will show. Let's look at the lake it's called the Sea of Galilee. It's actually a lake. It's about 10 miles across from left to right, east to west at its widest point. On the north side is where you have Capernaum. Some people say Capernaum, Capernaum, Capernaum. But okay, so that's his base for about a year and a half, as Brother Mark mentioned last week. On the north side of that, too, just to become a little familiar with the map, if you go slightly uphill, you go towards Chorazin and also the plain and the Mount of the Beatitudes. So, of course, this is just tradition saying where it happened, but and the tradition, I think, is there for a good reason, because it's very close to Capernaum, and there's a hill and a mount in that area. But, now, you'll notice going southwest on this map, southwest from Capernaum, you cross Magdala. You remember Mary of Magdalene? Okay, there's Mary Magdalene. It's Mary of Magdala. So you have that city there, Magdala, Cana, and then this raised area in the city in the raised area. Maybe call it like a mesa, like heaven, Arizona. It's a raised area, and that's where Nazareth is. But if you look south of Nazareth, going about 5 miles south of it, there's another raised area, and that's where Nain is, N-A-I-N, Nain. So, back to the text. The It says soon afterward, Jesus went to a city called Nain. Okay, soon after what? Okay, what happened? Okay, well, just a few verses before, in Capernaum, Jesus raises up. Okay, there's a centurion slave, right, that he loves a lot. The centurion loves a lot. And he says, just say the word, I'm not worthy that you come to my house, but because of a man under authority, I understand that, if you just say the word, if to be healed, my servant will be healed. And the servant is healed. So soon after that, imagine the high level of expectancy. People are going to start following. His disciples are there and this large crowd. Okay, and they're probably wondering where Jesus is going because Jesus hasn't announced. We don't know. I mean, whether he said where he was going, but Luke doesn't say that he announced it. So imagine ourselves in the story. We're following Jesus. Where's he going? And some may be whispering, maybe talking to ourselves, among ourselves. I think maybe he's going to Nazareth. We're walking that way. We know from the story it's 20, 25 miles to Nain or to Nazareth. It's basically the same direction until you reach a plateau area, a raised area. You would turn right to go to Nazareth, but maybe they notice he's not turning right. He's continuing to walk down this valley area. Okay, and that's where Nain is. It says he approached. Now, as he approached the gate of the city, now Nain is a small town, so it's not a gate in the sense of a fortress. Okay, like a castle, a fort. It's not that type of gate. By gate, it means that's a way, it's a marker so that people would know you go through this gate and then there's a city on the other side of this gate. Okay? So you have Jesus and his crowd, or the crowd following him. Now there's another crowd, there's another procession coming out of Nain. They're going to go downhill a little bit because it's in a raised area also. And it's very interesting because it says that there's a widow, okay, a widow leading this procession. There's some people carrying a body on like a gurney or something like that. It's canvas, maybe I'll think of like a couch. Okay, it's not the coffin in the sense of a closed coffin. That's a modern idea of it. But if you can imagine, there's like people carrying like I don't know the word gurney or something like they see in hospitals, but without the wheels and stuff. So they're carrying this body that's wrapped in cloth, and it usually within a day or two you bury the body. That area historically also is done. There's holes in caves that rich people would bury theirs in, and also there's areas in that area where there may be rocks over burial sites, and also maybe whitewashing some areas because they would whitewash burial spots, especially for the more poor, so that you don't accidentally walk over a gravesite and defile yourself. But anyway, so it says that the only son of his mother, the young man, and there was a sizable crowd from the city that was with her. Part of the sizable crowd were the professional wailers, the professional mourners who would follow, and also maybe flute players, musicians. These people were hired because the more wailing, the more mourning, it shows honor to the departed. Okay. Now, verse 13 it says, when the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, do not go on weeping. Okay. Excuse me. One thing to notice is Luke is very specific, and he's saying that the Lord saw her. It's not that Jesus saw the crowd coming, but it's showing that he saw her. Okay, this widow. very, very important part of this lesson in Luke is that Jesus is going to a certain location, and it's not a random road trip. None of his trips are. So we could see divine providence or a divine purpose in everything he does, especially if he's going from one location to another. He's going for the specific purpose of raising this young man from the dead. Okay. Now, you also notice it says that Jesus came up and touched the coffin, and the bearers came to a halt. It came to a halt for several reasons. Now, one was that probably out of shock, because it is highly irregular to touch what they're carrying, okay? Because you would become defiled, okay? Another thing is to consider is that we see this by the raising of the young man. Normally, if a person touches such things, or if they touch such things, they become defiled. But what we see here, and this is also happens when Jesus had healed the leper, the man with leprosy. Jesus, who is completely clean, he's sinless, can go to the situation and make what was defiled undefiled. Where if you or I did it, a normal person, if we touch something that's defiled, we become defiled. Okay? Well, since Jesus is God incarnate, when Jesus touches the dead, they get raised to life. So that's very important. A big difference. That's part of the emphasis here in Luke. Now, also you'll notice he says, still in verse 14, he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." We'll see this later also in the raising of Jairus' son, and also the famous scene in John, the raising of Lazarus. All three instances, raising someone from the dead. Jesus talks to these people, these dead people, as if they're living. Okay, so from the vantage point of Jesus, because he's both God and human, these people, their bodies are dead, but that's not their essence, so to speak. And it's a Christian teaching that some will say, body, we live in a body, and we have a spirit and soul. Sometimes some people will say spirit and soul are synonymous, or sometimes it's hard to tell, whether the soul and spirit are the same thing, but you have other teachings, spirit, soul, body. Okay, so you have both of those. It's not my point here to belabor that, but the point is that the body isn't everything to who we are. And we can know that without becoming too theological, is that we know that our mind, and our emotions and our will is something separate from our body. It can affect our body. I mean, that's just, psychologists talk about and stuff. But Jesus is talking to these dead people as if they're living. Now, there's something that we're going to see some symbolism here too, where Jesus is on a divine mission, divine plan. And we can see how Paul talks about this too. Romans 8:30. First, I'll read the typical way we're used to hearing it, the more literal reading. So then, these whom he predestined, he also called. And these whom he called, he also justified. And these whom he justified, he also glorified. This pericope, this passage in Luke, mainly talking about how whom God foreknew, who God predestined, he also called. So Jesus was going to name the specific purpose in mind. He knew that there was going to be the widow and that he was going to raise this boy, this young man from the dead, and that he was going to talk. Okay. Now here's another translation from the New Living Translation. It's more on the thought-to-thought type translation. So it may sometimes going to different translations is good. Simply if you're coming across passages that sound too theological and they can't wrap your head, you don't want to get out. It's hard to wrap your head around maybe some theological terms. But here's a version that puts it in more layman language. And having chosen them, he called them to be. And having chosen them, he called them to come to him. And having called them, he gave them right standing with himself. And having given them right standing, he gave them his glory. There's another passage I like for us to look at. Colossians 2, verses 13 and 14. There's something said here more than just Jesus talking to a dead man. Okay? Theologically, and we see this in writings of Paul, there's the concept that everyone is spiritually dead unless they're regenerated by God's Spirit. Excuse me. And here's that verses. And when you were dead in your wrongdoings and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he, God, made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all our wrongdoings, having canceled the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. So, Jesus is talking to the dead as if they're not dead. Okay? There's a couple meanings. The first is more literal, where he's talking to this dead man, young man, and he's going to raise him from the dead. Another thing is symbolically how God's calling to us, to humanity, to people, is through the scripture and through what he has done through Christ, and that we respond. Okay? Now, another part to see here is talking about the compassion of Jesus. In verse 13, it says, when he saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, do not go on weeping. Okay, so the compassion has to do with, part of it has to do in the original language, having a gut-wrenching feeling. Like sometimes we'll say, I feel like my stomach is in my throat, that type of feeling. But there's also the feeling that when Jesus had compassion, it was followed up with action. So often we may say to someone who's going through a traumatic situation, if there's anything you need, just let me know, and then we're on our way. We're not there anymore. Okay? And what compassion does is doesn't say something like, if you need any help, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. We do that without asking. For example, if they're mourning, maybe do the laundry for them, or say they have children, they're in school, pick them up from school for them. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can be kind to those who are mourning, or it doesn't have to be mourning, but because of this lesson, it's talking about a woman who is mourning. The next section, verses 16 and 17, it says, fear gripped them all, and they began glorifying God, saying, a great prophet has appeared among us, and God has visited his people. Well, I can imagine so. I mean, let's say we're in the party of mourners, and you see someone touch this couch, coffin type thing, and the boy sits up and starts talking, I think people would become reverential. They see something like that. And it says that the great prophet has appeared among us. There's two things about that. Literally, it's that the prophet has appeared in us. So, not even the idea among means the same thing, but it's the idea that a prophet has appeared within our camp, within our group. Also, they're referring to a great prophet. Well, they're thinking probably of Elijah raising a young boy in that general same area of Israel and Galilee. But if you look closely at those passages about Elijah and Elisha, they prayed to God, and God raised the boy from the dead. Elijah didn't raise him, God did. But in this instance, Jesus didn't pray to him. It doesn't say that Jesus prayed to God to raise this young man from the dead. I mean, Jesus told him to get up, wake up, right? Now, just in summation, just go over the 3 points. One would be that Jesus went to Nain to fulfill a predestined planned purpose. Okay, Jesus wasn't on a random road trip. The second would be that Jesus, he speaks to this dead young man as if he were living. But remember, he had this incident. You also have in a couple chapters, Jairus' daughter. He goes there and sees her, and the wailers. Jesus said he's just sleep. She is just sleeping, and they almost mock Jesus because these wailers are hired to mourn, and you must be crazy if you think this girl's dead. We know this girl's dead. He goes to her and says, "Talitha kumi," which is Aramaic, meaning young lamb. Wake up, young lamb. A young lamb, get up. Okay. Of course, when we all probably know, if you don't know about Jairus and Nain, you probably know about Lazarus, right? And they were saying, Martha and Mary both said, basically, we sent word out to you about a week ago. If you were to come here sooner, Lazarus would be living. So they already had an idea of Jesus' power. And he said, he says, don't you believe in the resurrection? They say, oh, yes, ultimately, everyone who's died, and there's going to be a judgment and will be raised. And then Jesus tells Mary and Martha, maybe both, he says, well, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe me? They say, yes. And then Jesus says, praise to God, that God glorifies Jesus in this situation, and he does he says, Lazarus, come forth. So, and you have Lazarus being spoken to, you have the young girl, Jairus' daughter, and this other unnamed young man, who Jesus talks to them. These are dead people. I mean, Jesus told me dead people, and they're not dead anymore. He tells them to get up, they get up. I mean, only God can do that, And the third point was the people glorified God in what happened. So this seems like maybe the high point, or one of the high points of the story. That we see movies of, but more important than seeing movies about, when you read about it in the Bible, is that something spectacular was happening, and they became reverential. They feared what could happen to them. And the last part, verse 17 says, and this report about him spread throughout Judea and in all the surrounding region. Now, the next week we'll be continuing this, where the disciples of John the Baptist, this word got out to the disciples of John the Baptist. John the Baptist time was, back in, I think it was chapter 4, Herod locked him up and he's still in prison. So this story continues in, John the Baptist not wondering, but, had Jesus say, if he's the one, is he the chosen one, or are they to expect another? So this passage, again, it's often maybe overlooked, but it has a lot in it, a lot of meaning in it. Okay, we have Jesus going with a divine purpose to one place to another, and when he goes to that place, he going there for a reason. He's not just on a road trip. And then he's fulfilling part of God's plan. So there's the purpose, there's a reason why he's going there. There's also the plan. He's going to raise this young man from the dead. And also he's going, the way of showing compassion is he's returning this young man to his mother, because the woman was already a widow. Okay, and the boy was likely her only form of support. So when he died, she would probably be very destitute. So here we can see God's grace in this situation where it's really a great story about God showing compassion, and that in our situations too. Think of your own life on, God providentially doing things and bringing things together for us. Just pray. Dear Lord, thank you for today and for coming to us and revealing yourself. And although, we're sinners, that you offered salvation through your Son. And hopefully we can be more compassionate and help others, in showing your love and leading them to salvation too. In Jesus' name, amen.
You are strong, you are brave, you are all you meant to be. Everything you ever dreamed came true. When you laugh, when you cry, I'll be always on your side, and thank God for you and me. When you were 12, your brother said, I will always have your back. When you're happy, when you're sad, through it all. When you were 16, your auntie said, I remember my first broken heart. Don't let it steal your spark, my love.